What's up, freaks? Welcome back to Zero Authority. Last time, Kai and I talked about our favorite albums from 2016, and this time we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to talk about a movie. So this was a documentary that came out last year called Low Sound Desert, and we're going to dive into that a little bit. First of all, let me introduce my guest today, our art director at FreqsTV, Kris.
My pleasure.
And our good friend Greg from the Munich-based stoner rock band Godsground. He's the bass player and founding member, and he's gonna weigh in with us on this film about the history of stoner rock. The movie that we're going to talk about is called Low Sound Desert. It's a film by German filmmaker Jörg Steineck from Berlin. And apparently he spent 10 years flying back and forth from Palm Springs, interviewing some of the legends from the stoner rock scene, and he presents us the first film about the history of the stoner rock scene from Palm Springs. First impressions.
Well, I thought the movie was great, and it was great that finally somebody made the decision to make a documentary about that musical genre, stoner rock, that is becoming so popular right now. And finally somebody's talking about all of those bands that have influenced us so much as musicians. Yeah, great.
Kris?
To me, the first thing that impressed me the most was that how your environment can influence or influence you as a musician, or what kind of style of music you're going to play. Because they were talking about the desert all the time and how basically boredom created a new sound. And that was very, very inspiring, because we live in this concrete jungle here. I mean, basically everybody who lives in a big city lives in a concrete jungle. And there's quite a lot of inspiration, but not that kind of inspiration, I think. And that was quite impressive to have this awesome view every day, and to them it's like this regular thing, and out of boredom they create a new sound, and we have, all we have is concrete, and a total different view on music, I guess, as well.
The funny thing about the place kind of creating the sound, I think they said in there that Frank Sinatra is buried in Palm Springs.
Yeah, and that he hated rock and roll.
Yeah, and that it's kind of funny to me that another American music legend who hated rock and roll kind of caused the birth of another subgenre of rock and roll. I think that's kind of an ironic twist.
To them it was just like this party area for Hollywood stars where they were golfing and having, excesses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny.
So let's talk about the film a little bit. According to the biography about the film, Jörg spent 10 years and shot this totally DIY, mostly on his own. And he did it partly just to keep the spirit of the scene in the film. So this like do everything yourself and shoestring budget, guerrilla filmmaking. And I mean, it shows. You can actually see kind of the progress of the filmmaking, from as the quality of the cameras change, you can see this change in the film. But I think regardless, it still looks pretty great. I mean, overall, it has a certain mood and atmosphere, even when some of the footage is maybe not TV quality or something. But
I really love the VHS footage from the 90s, which looks like footage from the 70s, and it looks so familiar, and yet it looks so far away, the whole punk and stoner movement.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not called stoner, right? It was called punk, basically, right, in the beginning?
I think the scene started as a punk rock scene, and then because they were so isolated from everything that was happening outside of the whole desert area, it just developed into something totally new. And yeah, this happened to become stoner rock. Yeah, awesome.
Greg, what do you think is the reason that, I mean, they do talk about this, that it started from this punk thing, but to me, like modern day stoner music sounds a lot more like blues. And I don't ever think that punk really sounds like blues, that seems more like the rock thing, metal thing, but stoner rock has this kind of bluesy feeling. How do you think they got from one place to the other?
I don't know, I think it just probably happened like it happens in many different scenes across the globe. Like some people come from a punk rock background and then they get into that new style of music and start to write their own songs, and their music is then influenced by punk rock. Then another guy comes in who's influenced by blues rock music or psychedelic music from the 70s, which today is also a big part of what we call stoner rock today. And then over time it all meshes up, and all of a sudden you have a new style of music with punk elements, heavy metal or even death metal elements, and blues rock and psychedelic rock elements. I think it's just the way it goes in the scene, you know.
Admittedly, I didn't know very much about stoner rock before watching the film. You know, I mean, I knew Caius and Queens of the Stone Age,
Everybody
but
knows Caius.
most of the other bands I had only maybe heard of or had not heard of at all. So when I watched the film, it was kind of like just learning about all this completely new. What about you guys? I mean, what was your experience with the scene?
I of course grew up with Caius and stuff like that. Let me say something. It was funny to see, to me, at least to me it felt like that Caius and of course Queens of the Stone Age then wasn't that accepted among themselves, because there's this funny little part in the movie where they say this scene never wanted the attention of anybody, and when all of a sudden Caius became this big rock band, they were like treated like, you're not one of us, you know. And that's and it's funny. It's always the same basically, you know. If you get somehow successful with something, everybody starts hating you, and that's funny. But yeah, of course, I grew up with Caius. To be honest, I haven't listened to stoner regularly in the last couple of years. This was one of the first times in years that I actually felt that connection to this whole desert thing, which almost every stoner band picks up. And if you're a total newcomer to stoner, you have to watch this movie because it makes so much more sense to associate this whole genre with the desert, and not, you know, like I said, they have their environment that influenced them, and all we have is this concrete jungle around us. And I definitely want to listen to more stoner rock now.
Greg, what did you? I mean, you knew some of these bands, I think, going into watching this. So
yeah,
what was this for you?
Yeah, actually, that was also very cool for me as I saw the movie, because I'm a big fan of all of those bands and the whole desert rock scene. So like 3 years ago, I flew to Los Angeles and I went to this like 1.5, 2 week pilgrimage to the desert, and I went to Palm Springs, booked a room in a motel, and just spent a whole week traveling to all those places that I then saw again in the movie. And I went to the Rancho de la Luna studios where Eagles of Death Metal and even Caius, I think, recorded some of the records, and that was great. And if you actually go there and see how it looks and how small those cities are and how empty the whole place is, you just really get the feeling of that music. Yeah, it's great.
Kai, we got blue all of a sudden. Is that okay for you?
If you had an amp and a guitar, you could play in a band. It didn't matter if you knew how to play or not.
Okay, so the film is actually separated into 2 chapters. And the first chapter to me is a little bit about history of Palm Springs, development of the scene, and some of the initial bands that came out of it. And the second half seems to be more about the live experience in the desert, how it became these desert parties, how they developed into these desert parties, and then where the scene went beyond the city and into the world. Is there anything in there that you want to comment on? Or
I thought it was pretty interesting that to me it was like most people didn't care that much about the music, but the parties and the access. Like they told at the end of the mid 90s, 94, 95, it was all about parties and drug dealers and you know, gang members and so on. And it's funny to see how
it seemed like the ugly side kind of came out, right?
I mean, how things shifted from the music to just being to smash the place. I mean, and it's quite sad that the scene, even somebody in the film said that the scene destroyed itself basically somehow in the mid 90s a little bit, because, you know, it wasn't about the music, it was more about, you know, parties and drugs and you know, being anti everything. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what.
I think that's kind of what they implied, and because of Caius, it kind of traveled to Europe and so forth.
Yeah, like I said before, it was a scene that never wanted this attention, and all of a sudden there was Caius or maybe even more articles about the desert scene, and they never wanted to be in the focus because, you know, it was too excessive maybe, yeah.
But Greg, what happened when Caius came to Europe, for example?
Well, that basically, when Caius first came to Europe, I think basically the same thing happened in Seattle with Nirvana. Like there was this first band who got popular, and all of a sudden all of the record companies started to focus their attention on that scene, and that's when over time other bands from that genre, from the desert and from the LA area generally, started to get signed. And I totally agree with what Kris said. You can never make everyone happy from a scene like that, you know. There's those guys who love that finally the music that comes from your scene is being recognized, and there's these other guys who don't like that you're taking away their little secret that they have, you know. But I personally, as a musician, think it's great that there's this one band who makes it possible for other bands to become popular as well, and that's what happened when Caius came to Europe first.
And it's always important to create new genres, even if it's not that intended, because Josh Holmes said somewhere they used bass amps instead of guitar amps, you know, and stuff
and
like that.
That became their thing, yeah.
Yeah, and just, okay, they did that because nobody else did it, but it's always cool to have something new, and why not share it with everybody else, you know? It's, if you have something special, something new, you know, share it with the world, you know?
Yeah. There seems to be kind of a growing or vibrant stoner rock scene in Germany.
Yeah. Totally.
Can you talk about that at all, like how it came about, and maybe your own experience with your own band here? And
yeah, it's happening in Germany and all over the place in Europe, and I think that's because more and more bands from the US, even all those little bands, all those indie stoner rock bands from the US are touring Europe now, and that kind of started to develop that scene that we have in Europe right now. There's new stoner rock bands, or whatever you want to call it, desert rock bands, coming up all the time, and the scene is growing constantly. And this is great for bands like my band, for example, because it gives us the opportunity to share our music with more and more people, and maybe even, you know, get a support slot with a cool band that we have always liked from the US, and finally get to meet our heroes in person, you know. It's great.
It seems like there's a number of festivals now in Germany for stoner rock music too, right? And in the UK?
Yeah, that's part of that whole development, I think. There's, like, just in Germany, you have, I can at least think of 5 festivals, like the Desert Fest in Berlin, there's the Under the Black Moon Festival in Munich, there's the Keep It Low Festival in Munich, Lake on Fire Festival, more and more festivals, because more and more people want to listen to that kind of music.
What do you think it is about the music that is so appealing even like to German or European audiences?
I don't know, probably if I talk about that from my perspective, what I like about, or the reason why I got into stoner rock music was because I've always liked that psychedelic and old school hard rock music from the 70s, but I also like heavy metal music, and I think that musical genre kind of combines that. You have that heavy guitars, heavy fuzzy guitars combined with melodic and clean vocals, and that's probably one reason why people dig that kind of music.
Yeah, clean vocals and heavy music is rare these days.
Yeah.
And I think that stoner rock is one of the few heavy music styles that has some kind of ambient touch to it. You know, I mean, it sounds very ambient in a very hard rocking way, and I think that not a lot of styles can achieve that. That's what I like about it. It's very moody and very, you know, atmospheric.
Anything to take away from the film itself, like from I'm not necessarily a technical point of view, but as a film, as a rockumentary, because we obviously like rockumentaries at FreqsTV. What did you guys think about the film, about the storytelling? Did you like the 2-chapter thing? Did you like the interviews? did you have any opinions?
Since I'm not that much into stoner rock as Greg is, I love totally how deep it went from where it started, how people got influenced, that it evolved from punk rock, which was very interesting to me because, I mean, to me it doesn't have much to do with punk rock anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you listen to stoner rock, it's dirty, yeah, but it's not punk rock actually. And to see how all those different type of genres and people came together. It was either metalheads or punk rockers or whatever, and they still, got along. And that it was cool to see that and to have this movie that showed you how it evolved, because I didn't know that, and it was very interesting.
Greg?
I think the cool thing about the movie was that because of the structure and because it started from the beginning and then got deeper into the music and how things developed, it's a movie that if I call myself a stoner rock nerd, somebody who is really into that scene, it's very interesting for somebody like that. And it's also interesting for somebody who doesn't know anything about stoner rock, because the structure makes it possible for him to get an overview about the whole scene, and everything is well explained. And if you've watched the movie, you know everything about that, or you know a lot about that scene without any background knowledge. And it's a cool movie for everybody, whether you're a stoner rock guy or whether you're not a stoner rock guy.
And he caught the passion about the scene in the 90s very well, and that was very impressive, because all those folks were so dedicated. They didn't need it, much, they need music classes or whatever. They just had, the gear, the instruments, and just, turn up to 11 and then, just rock out. I mean, it's so influential, because nowadays everything seems so technical, right? I mean, we're all making music, right? And everything seems so technical. You have to write the right pedals, the right gear, and stuff like that. But those guys didn't care. I mean, they found a guitar. Okay, can you play it? No, but let's see what's going to happen. And that was very, very influential. And
that's the punk rock side, I think.
Inspiring, yeah, totally.
Music, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
And the movie captured that perfectly. Yeah. They were also passionate about the scene and the music, which was great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my final thoughts are basically, I share your opinion as well. I mean, like I said, I didn't know much about the scene before I watched it, and two things. The first thing that struck me about it was that I couldn't tell right away what kind of documentary it was going to be, because it's informative, but there's no voiceover, and it's partly what we call observational documentary, where it's just kind of following things happen. But this stuff happened already 20 years ago, and so it's kind of catching up with those people, following them in their current life, talking about their old life, which I thought was really transcendent, and it didn't feel like we were just trying to honor this one time period as being something perfect, but actually were seeing it from the perspective of time and how it's changed and how it's influenced other things. Yeah. So for me, when I started to watch it, the thing that I took away from it, the two things I took away from it mostly were the heart of the scene, like how passionate these guys were, and how they really just made this thing out of nothing.
And still are.
Are. And also how the film kind of transcends typical music period documentary filmmaking, and allows you to feel connected to the scene in a modern way, and not just always this, back then it was so great, So for me, totally awesome. I can't wait to see what the director does next.
You should definitely check it out if you have never been into stoner rock. It's just very informative, it's basically about, if you're a dedicated musician, you definitely have to check it out, because it's very inspiring.
So that was our Zero Authority on the matter. Thanks, guys, for joining.
Thanks for having us.
I'm sure we'll see
Hopefully.
Kris for sure, and Greg, can't wait to have you back again. So check out Godsground. We'll put some links down below to check out Greg's band, and I will also put links to where you can buy the DVD and check out the movie as well. So cool. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Freaks out.